dinosaur shirt. We're in my room again. Woo! Yay! Wanted to talk more about travel today, so I thought, let's be in the room again. Yeah, it's a little bit cooler in here is why. It's like so hot downstairs. It's so warm. There's no air conditioning in Ireland.
Why is this how this works?
Really though, it's super hot. And the house is like super well insulated, so it just like keeps the heat in. Anyway, so what we're talking about today is food and language. Yeah. So like cultural kind of stuff. You know, when you're traveling, especially to other countries, you may be wondering, how much of the language do I need to know? If you're not wondering this and they speak another language, you're kind of a jerk. Like seriously, learn something, anything, like 3 sentences, just try, make an effort. It'll be fine, trust me, please. So when you're traveling, I think it's important to kind of get a general concept of the language. You know, you don't have to obviously be fluent. You don't even have to be like semi-fluent, just like make an effort, make an attempt. You know, make a list of kind of like what sort of phrases you're gonna need to know, memorize those, or have them written down. I actually did that when I was in South Korea. I had a decent concept of Korean. I was working on it, but when I went to Thailand and when I was in like Bangkok and stuff, Thai was just a little much for me. I have stories about that. I'll tell those stories some other time. Anyway, Thai was a little tough for me. So in Thailand, I like wrote down some of the phrases in a tiny notebook, and when I was in Korea I used the same tiny notebook, and I took notes as I learned things. So for Thailand I like prepared in advance. When I was in South Korea, because I had like a general concept of Korean, I was just sort of like taking notes when I was like, oh, I should remember that for next time. So you can kind of approach it differently depending on where you're going. You may be wondering like, hey, what phrases should I learn? Well, let me tell you. So what I personally believe is I think that it's important to learn some very specific ones. Where's the toilet? Vital. Is this spicy is just a good thing to learn in general, unless you love spicy food. Like if you love spicy food, you want to ask if it's spicy. But like in general, learning the phrase, is this spicy, is not a bad idea. But my favorite is if you don't have like running allergies and stuff and you like food in general, I recommend learning what do you like. That's what I learned in every single language. Everywhere I went, I learned what do you like. And I had the waiter order for me in every single restaurant I went to in countries across the globe, like 15 plus countries. I've had the waiter just order me food and it's always delicious. It's always so good. And I'm just like, you know this better than I do. What should I be eating? And they bring out food and it's awesome. It's so good. Like really delicious. I love doing that. So that's always a fun one. You know, if there's like certain things you want to be eating, you know, memorize how to say it. It's always important to, in my opinion, to memorize these kind of smaller ones that you may not know about. A big one being thank you. So for some reason, some people don't memorize that. Memorize how to say thank you. I would also recommend memorizing excuse me or pardon me, like when you're going through a crowd. Like what phrase should you say to be like, I'm sorry for bumping into you, or should you say anything? Some places you're not supposed to say anything. So that's the kind of like side ones I'd talk about. Finally, I'd recommend memorizing the name of your hotel, the hostel, and the name of the area that your hotel or hostel or whatever is in. So for example, when I was living in Singapore, I was near Jalan-Besar Stadium, and so I memorized that, but it was also, I could walk to the hostel from Jalan-Besar Stadium, so I memorized how to say that, but I also knew I was in the Lavender, like Lavender was the area. So, you know, you can memorize both those things, that way if you forget the name of the hotel, or if the taxi driver's like, what is that place? What is this hotel of which you speak? Where are you? Then you can, you know, name the area as well. There's things like that that can help. Google Maps is lovely as well. Did you know that with Google Maps and like Apple Maps too, but Google Maps, you can like save an area, so you don't have to like use data, like phone data or Wi-Fi or anything. You can just like save the area into your maps. Highly recommend doing that. Yeah, and then when it comes to food, get yourself a list of foods that people recommend trying. Definitely like be like, oh, this is like local specialties or something that I want to try, that kind of stuff. But also just leave yourself open to the random stuff you're gonna see. There are so many random things that I saw when I was traveling that I was like, I don't know what that is, but I will now put it in my mouth. And it was usually quite delicious. Like all kinds of like random pancakes stuffed with like peanuts and like, oh, those were so good. And like random cheese tarts in Japan, and Like there was one time they had like choux pastry and it was like rolled in like toasted almonds and it was filled with like soft serve. There's that kind of stuff you're just not gonna be able to plan. So I'd say plan maybe like 50 to 60% of your meals, and then for the rest, wing it. See what's around, try things. That's at least what I recommend. And then of course, the final thing, if you have allergies, memorize how to say these allergies in the language. Or even better, I actually recommend writing it down. Again, write it down, just get tiny notebook and write it down, and you can show it to people and be like, and then you know it's perfect. You know, you can double check that on Reddit. You can be like, hey Reddit, how do you say this in your language? So I can like write it out. And you know, you have a little like notebook. I had to do that when I had to buy medicine when I was in Seoul. So I just looked up like what the name of the medicine was in Korean, like what it should be, and I wrote it down, and I just like, and they were like, here you go, and then I paid them and we were solid. So those are some of my tips and tricks. I'll leave even more in the blog post below. But no matter what, traveling is an adventure. Just do your best, just try, you know, make these efforts with language and food and stuff to get out of your comfort zone, because that's where it gets really, really fun. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.